Hello. So I'm making this video for you guys to just review what we have discussed today. So what we were discussing, you already know, and those who were absent for you, that we were saying that you will be working on chapter 10 and 11. So it's your own pace that you use before your exam one, but you have to cover 10 and 11. And I have suggested to start working on the worksheets and the study guide and then go through the videos and the resources available to you in the modules and try to get on top of all these topics. And I'm there to answer all your questions. Rather, I just keep delivering a boring lecture for an hour or 2 hours for an hour or two. It's better that you prepare yourself and come for a discussion during the class. I will, as you ask question, I will go over the material. So it's going to be a tailored lecture based on your questions. um this chapter is trying to talk about the liquid and solid. Mostly these topics are there. um, all here is related to the liquid, but you must know that intermolecular forces, when we talk about, is very important for the molecules to interact with each other, right? So there was a confusion between the intramolecular and intermolecular. So if you look at the water molecule here, it is not the intermolecule. This is not an IMF that we are talking about. So do not get confused. It is within the molecule is always intramolecular force. We are talking about intermolecular force. Intermolecular force means two molecules are there and there's an interaction between them. Okay, so more than one water molecule will have interactions between each other. That's what we call intermolecular force. Okay, so you guys were good. Some of you were really good in your understanding, and some of you were really struggling. I noticed that. So make sure that you know, first of all, sort it out how many different types of intermolecular forces are there. So then you try to understand how they are different from each other. So we have London dispersion force is the least powerful one. The strength of this is the least, and it's actually present in every single molecule. Okay, so it's gonna make its role everywhere. This is what we call induced dipole, induced dipole. Why we call it induced dipole, induced dipole? That actually the molecule is non-polar, so you cannot imagine there's going to be a dipole present in the molecule. This is called a transient dipole that is being generated by the influence of another molecule in the proximity. Okay, so cutting it short, London dispersion force, you can read it yourself. With London dispersion force is the form of intermolecular force is going to be present in all the molecules, no matter if they're polar or non-polar. Starting from dipole, dipole, and hydrogen bonding, you should notice that we talk about the dipole, we talk about the dipole induced dipole, and we talk about the dipole dipole. Okay, so dipole induced dipole, that is being generated by another molecule that I was talking about. Okay, and then the hydrogen bond is the strongest intermolecular interaction. So you go to the dipole dipole, you go to the, and then you read about the polar molecule. You already know about the polar molecule, how the molecules are categorized as polar and non-polar. We have discussed it in details during the lecture, but that's all your review from General Chemistry 1. Okay, so the dipole is going to be the intermolecular force when one polar molecule encounters another polar molecule. Um, this is a brief explanation. So here, this chart separation on the same molecule shows that the molecule is polar. Okay, so then when a polar molecule come across and the polar molecule, what you get is a dipole-dipole interaction. The specialized form of dipole-dipole interaction is actually the hydrogen bond that we are going to discuss shortly. Okay, these are the conditions for the hydrogen bond. Not all the groups are going to form hydrogen bond. Make sure that you read it thoroughly, that these are unusually strong due to the great polarity of the bond and the small size of the hydrogen atom. Okay, hydrogen. So a type of dipole, so it's a dipole-dipole interaction occurs when hydrogen is bonded, when the hydrogen is only bonded to these three. No other atom. Keep that in your mind. So when I ask you that question, that if you have water molecule here, and then you have methane here, is there going to be a hydrogen bond between these two? No, because this is available for the hydrogen bonding, but hydrogen here is not available for the hydrogen bonding. Okay, the partner is not, this partner is not available here. So here it either needs to be an oxygen, nitrogen, and fluorine, so that this hydrogen can make interaction with. So that's why I told you that between the two water molecules, the hydrogen bonding is possible, because the hydrogen from one molecule is going to make interaction, a dipole-dipole for interaction. So if we have two water molecules here, right, we know that this is partially negative, this is partially positive. Then another water molecule, let's say, comes here with this hydrogen here and this hydrogen here. So this oxygen and this hydrogen is going to make. But look at the condition that this hydrogen is attached to the oxygen only. And then hydrogen atoms are attracted to lone pairs on the partner, which can either be nitrogen, oxygen, or fluorine. So, and then I gave you the example of the DNA and how the strength of the DNA depends on the GC ratio that can contribute to 3 hydrogen bond between the two strands of the double-stranded DNA. These are the bases. This is A, T, G, C. I tried to show you that how complementary these bases are from one strand to another strand. If it's C here, it's going to be G here. If it's T here, it's going to be A here. If it's T here, it's going to be A here. I told you AT can make two hydrogen bonds, and then GC can make 3 hydrogen bonds. How come? Their structures allow them to make 3 bonds. The structures of these two bases do not allow them to make 3 bonds. They're only available bond, and you know that there's going to be a condition for the hydrogen bonds to form. So in the structure of these two bases, allowed hydrogen bonding is only 2 bonds per pair, and for the GC is 3 bonds per pair. And that's why the GC ratio determines the strength, how strong the DNA, how strong the 2 strands of DNA are bonded to each other. This is when you add an ion to, let's say, this is a simple example of when you add sodium ion into the water molecule. That's how the ion dipole interaction is going to be formed. Okay, you add chlorine, when you add sodium chloride into the water, and again, if this is water, and we know that there is a charge separation on water molecule, that's how it's going to interact. This is called a dipole, the ion dipole interaction, whether it's a cation, it's anion, doesn't matter. And the dispersion for it's an instantaneous dipole. Okay, it's the instantaneous dipole can cause a neighboring molecule to have a dipole. So it's all about the non-polar. Even in the non-polar molecule, instantaneous dipole is generated, which is like a flash kind of dipole. But due to that dipole, in a molecule nearby, the induced dipole is generated. Okay, so the 2 temporary dipoles attract each other, and that's why it's the weakest form of the intermolecular force, but it still is there. Okay, this is temporary dipole happening here, this is induced dipole happening here, and that's the result. We have the London dispersion force. Okay, so the polarizability trend also explain why the interaction, why the London dispersion forces may be different, right? Because it depends on the polarizability. Okay, as you go down into the column here, look at the halogens. Okay, ease of inducing a dipole, size of the molecule, shape of the molecule, it all contributes to the strength of the London dispersion force. Okay, these are overall, these are weak and short-lived. So also, if you look about the higher surface area, great polarizability, the strength of the dispersion force increases with the contact area. So contact area is also very important. So here more surface area is available for the contact, so the larger contact is possible, the strongest hour of all London dispersion force will be present here. And that's how you see the difference in the boiling points as well. Okay, they are all hydrocarbons. You see this is all mingled up, uh, a little open and then completely open molecule. So from here to here to here, you're going to see the strongest London dispersion. So the strength of London dispersion force vary depending on different factors, and we are talking about the surface area in the molecule, and that's how you see the increase in the boiling point. You already know stronger the interaction is, higher the boiling point will be. And we have discussed this, that dipole-dipole interaction is weaker. A form of dipole-dipole is hydrogen bond, which is the strongest intermolecular force, and then the dispersion force that we are talking about. Okay, these are the examples that you can go through, but the most important thing is to predict in the molecule what type of IMFs would be present. And we know that the London dispersion is present everywhere. So we are actually asking you in this question, what I'm trying to ask you is to tell me that which is going to be the dominant IMF. So when we talk about the H2O, we know that it's a polar compound. And when it's polar, then we are expecting a dipole-dipole interaction, but because the hydrogen bonds are formed, so the most dominant one is going to be the hydrogen bonding. This is a non-polar compound, so that's going to be the London dispersion force only. Here you might get a chance to have hydrogen bond. This is again going to be non-polar and London dispersion force. This is octanol, octane, the fossil fuel that we burn in our cars. I2 is a non-polar compound. Non-polar means London dispersion forces. This is going to be a polar compound, and polar means dipole-dipole. You might need to draw to figure out if it's polar or non-polar, and you have to start from the scratch, means drawing a valid Lewis structure, and then drawing the dipole moments on all the bonds that you have there, and then deciding on based on if if there is a net dipole moment in the molecule or not. Okay, we discussed this, that the hydrogen bond says the largest dipole-dipole force. The largest dipole-dipole force is hydrogen bond, and the hydrogen bond is possible only in this molecule. Why not in this one and not in this one? Figure it out. We have discussed that in class. So which of the following would possess the lowest boiling point? The lowest boiling point means the least powerful IMF. Okay, and that's going to be the London dispersion force. And for that, I had to find out the non-polar molecule. Non-polar is this right away, so that's going to be the least powerful IMF, the London dispersion force, and thus the lowest boiling point. So you're going to be doing all of that. It's asking us for intermolecular forces exist. What types of? So the London dispersion force is going to be everywhere. And this one is actually going to be the London dispersion force, and also going to be a dipole-dipole because the molecule is polar. Here it is going to form hydrogen bonds, so it's going to be LDF, it's going to be dipole-dipole, and it's going to be also the hydrogen bond. All of them are possible, right? And this one is already know that this is a polar compound, so LDF is there, and hydrogen bond is going to be the dominant one, no dipole-dipole, because that is going to be the hydrogen bond. I'm stopping here.